Welcome to the Couple-preneurs Show, helping couples in business develop structure and strategies that nurture the balance between business and home, bringing you interviews and insights to give you the secret sauce of power couples. Here are your hosts, Oscar and Kaya Frazier.
Entrepreneurs, couplepreneurs, people in business, aspiring entrepreneurs. If any of these things resonate with you, you are absolutely in the right place. Today, we've got an absolutely phenomenal guest, and I'm so excited to introduce him to you all. But before we do that, let me pass it over to Kaya, as I know she's got to at least thank our sponsors before we dive right in.
We got to thank them. So our first sponsor is Carolina Runners, a family-owned trucking company. Owner-operators that are looking for an authority, please check them out at carolina-runners.com. That's carolina-runners.com. We also have Talk Shirts Me, shirts that speak and help you express your style. Check them out at talkshirtome.com. Again, that's talkshirtome.com.
Look at you, man. You are just flowing through that stuff today, man. That's pretty damn impressive right there. So everyone that's listening, before I introduce our guest, let me give you a quick and dirty as far as why I'm so excited about this. As most of you know, Kai and I have been serial entrepreneurs for almost 20 years, and we've had the ups, we've had the downs, we've had everything in between, but we always have found a way to reinvent, rejuvenate, and shift as we need to ensure that we stay, one, profitable, and two, make sure we're not homeless. Right. So today we've got an excellent guest. This gentleman is going to be able to share everything from his 20-year film and television producing career, all the way to having 6 patents now within the technology space. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me please welcome Howard Rosen to our show. Howard, how are you today, sir?
Terrific, Oscar and Kaya.
All right.
Awesome. We're excited about talking with you today.
Yep. So let's see, where do we begin? So before we go into the nuts and bolts about who you are and kind of, what you do, Howard, give us just like your background, like, where are you from? Kind of how did you get into entrepreneurship, and what are some of the things that you're doing today?
Okay, well, and is this a 4-hour podcast? Did you say? So the very quick story is, by education, I was educated as an MBA with majors in international finance and marketing, trained to run a Fortune 500 company. The problem was, I think I missed the class where they said you can't go from graduating straight to running the Fortune 500 companies. There had to be some intermediary steps. So that clearly wasn't my plan. So I said, so naturally with that background, I turned and spent 20 odd years producing film and television. And of course, with that kind of background, it's a natural segue into health IT, which is where I am today. Now, there are pieces in there that sort of fill in the blanks, but ostensibly, it was actually when I was building the film and television company, we got in the area of education and training, and we're talking 2005, and I expanded in the area of medical education, continuing medical education, and working on a product for type 2 diabetes. I learned how pervasive it was and how pervasive it was going to be. And thinking, well, what's being done? I explained to me what was being done, and I said, well, that's great, but only 15% of people are managing their diabetes. And then being a card-carrying, arrogant producer, I said, what we got to do is come up with a solution that engages the people to want to involve themselves in managing their diseases. And I kind of went, well, that took about 10 seconds. And I went, okay, well, I think I've cured diabetes. Wonder what else I can do for the rest of the day. And went on my merry way, but that idea just sat there, and eventually it evolved into what has become LifeWIRE, which is the company I have today that I founded in 2008.
Excellent.
And what you mentioned, I currently hold 6 patents, and 7th one I'm hoping to be awarded within the next couple of months.
just for the GED section in the room over here where I'm sitting at, I'm only teasing. Walk us through that process when it comes to like patents, right? I know a little bit about it, not enough to be dangerous or to really even open my mouth to say I know something about it. So I would love to hear a little bit more. What was that journey like for you?
Well, I'll explain and be honest, I was very much in that world. I'm still very much in the world, particularly if you speak to my patent attorneys. But what happened was when I first came up with the idea, it was suggested to me that I should file for what's known as a provisional patent, which is just to basically it's a placeholder. It's relatively inexpensive to do, but it's a placeholder just because of an idea from somebody who's not known in health or anything else. Just to be able to sort of say, look, I've got this IP, or I've got a patent pending or provisional. So it was really done as a marketing element, just to have this provisional patent or a patent application. And then as time went on, I went to go from provisionally, I had to make a decision to go. And I said, well, we're still, young idea. Okay, let's start filing, going for this patent process, which is not for, it's something where it's a much more involved process as you get into it all. But it's really interesting nevertheless. In my particular case, there's two tests for patent. One is it a novel idea? And the other test, is it obvious? And obviousness they base on, are there previous things that have been done that will lead you to, that have been filed as patents, that would lead you to think, oh, this is an obvious extension of what's already been filed. Right. So in my case, when the patent office looked at it, they said, well, no, it's definitely novel. It's certainly not obvious, but you're crazy. Now, the third element was not part of it, but it was a very expensive, because I kept on having my attorneys go to explain to them, well, no, there's something real here. So this was in 2005. In 2007, the iPhone came out. And because I'm dealing with communication in terms of what LifeWIRE does, they went, well, the patent office said, it's certainly, novel idea, but look, because the iPhone, it's obvious. And then it cost me a lot of money for the attorneys to say, dudes, yes, maybe obvious now, but our client was crazy for 2 years. So you still got to look at them from the early days. So make a very long story short, it took 9 years to get my first patent approved.
Wow.
And then since then, it's probably been one every year or so, having gone through that process.
Very impressive. Very impressive.
But it's not for the faint of heart, and I think there's at least 6 kids I've put through graduate school based on how much I paid in legal fees. Yeah, not mine, my attorney's kids.
There we go. So I see that another part of what some of the listeners need to make sure that they understand as well. Howard, looks like you are one of the top 100 innovators of the next century, based on the Rockefeller Foundation. Also one of the top 30 mHealth innovators by the mHealth Alliance within the UN Foundation. What was that like, and what was it like getting those kind of awards, and how did you get to that point to get those?
Well, it was obviously a huge honor and a surprise on both of them. Part of it was because I got involved in this, or fell into it, for lack of a better term, in very early days. And because I didn't know any better, I just kept on pushing in terms of saying, well, what is this, and trying to learn what this was all about. And I think as a result, very quickly, I was honored that actually one of my first clients was the VA, the Veterans Administration. Nice. Working with veterans, particularly suffering from post-traumatic stress, high-risk suicidal and substance use. And we did a lot of work very early on with those groups in terms of using, I guess the backstory from LifeWIRE, very quickly, the technology, it's a communication platform. And it allows communication between providers and patients on an automated remote basis. There's no need for any software whatsoever. The individuals can choose whatever the device. It's really using the power of the cloud to enable them in real time in natural language. And so we worked with these individuals, and because of the early success, I was able to, I guess, in terms of we certainly got above the radar from being this sort of small little group to getting more recognition. And it was a little bit overwhelming and kind of, frankly, surprising to a certain extent. in terms of the kind of recognition for the work that we did. But on the other hand, it was an honor and frankly, a massive driver to continue to do this and try to do more. Not for the accolades, but to sort of say, look, we're helping people. These awards helped get us noticed that allowed us to be able to help more people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So your transition from film and television into, what you're doing now, most people would be like, how can you possibly connect those two, right? So my question would be, okay, you're sitting in a room 5 years from now, and you have the opportunity to talk to your younger self from 20 years ago. What do you say to your younger self in that situation about how things are going to transition?
It's an excellent question. The transition was in part, and an extra mistake I made was thinking that it would be very different from one to the other. On a practical basis, when it comes to being, if you're sort of looking at film production in terms of the basis of building a company to do a certain goal, and particularly when budgets are tight, regardless what the budget is of the production you're dealing with. Starting a business like this, and particularly health IT, is not that much different. You're trying to put something, you have limited resources. How do you put these pieces together? And frankly, what I did was I actually emulated what I did in doing films in starting the business, which was finding the best people I could to lead certain areas of the company initiative that we're doing. That would do, like they had, a director, a star, lead photographer, cameraman, for example. I did the same thing in healthcare in terms of getting a chief medical officer, marketing people, technologists, and tried to find ways to get them to help. Let's put something together here and cobble it together. The lesson is these things. The most important thing is being clear as to your vision, and really maintaining it, because it's one thing. It's one thing to be inspired by the idea and say, I think I've got a cool idea. The other part is actually pushing that through to come through to enable that vision. In fact, in terms of my first two, I had a board of advisors that I brought on fairly recently. Their sole job for 2 years was to convince me not to do this. I kind of went, look, I'm inspired to do this, but there must be other solutions that do it the way I'm doing it, or there must be a large competitive set. It's already being done. I don't want to, go from, a fairly good life to sort of going back to start from, back to building a new business again.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I said, I wanted them, the job was convince me not to do this. Show me the competitive set. Show me where this is already being done successfully. So I don't have to worry about it, not do it anymore. I could go, okay, great. It's being done. That was it. I did my best, and it's already being done. Fantastic. Yeah. Sadly, depending who you speak to, the board came to me after 2 years and said, got bad news for you, Howard. You've got something here.
Nice.
Wow, man.
Great.
Wow. So,
that's part of, to the younger self is really making sure you find advisors, and people who can really help you and mentor you through what you're going through. No matter what success you may have had in other businesses, you're going to doing something new. There's always something new to learn.
Absolutely.
And to sort of be open to that.
Yeah, and one quick geeky question. Kaya knows I can be on the. I'm a data analyst guy, artificial intelligence guy.
Oh, are you? Okay.
So I think of like LifeWIRE, right? And I like. Yep. So I'm assuming. Let me not make any assumptions. Let me just ask the direct question. So when it comes to the communication between the health provider and the patient, is that just like a stream, or is there any AI components that's looking at sentiment analysis or anything in addition, or how does the inner workings of this work? Just at the highest level. I don't want to go into the weeds too much.
So the core element of LifeWIRE is it's that last mile connectivity to the patient collecting data. So we actually collect 3 streams of data. We collect patient generated data, which which we design so it's validated for use in AI predictive modeling. We collect data off of wearables and medical devices, actually over 400 wearables and medical devices. And we collect pharmacy histories, pharmaceutical histories, soon to be lab histories as well. The idea, to your point, Oscar, is to be able to take that and feed those data streams. We sort of call it a digital fingerprint for an individual, because that really defines that person, how they respond, and all these other pieces, to feed predictive modeling and AI engines. What we do on the LifeWIRE side is we actually take clients' existing workflows and their rule sets and use that for the automated interactions with the patients. So depending how they respond, there's a response already tied to the workflows of our clients. If there's something outside of that workflow, we automatically send a notification system and can deliver them to a call center, deliver them to the provider directly, or send a notification to the providers to follow up with the patient. So we have a level of predictive AI that's in there based on clients' existing workflows, but fundamentally it's designed to actually feed our clients predictive modeling to give them the most robust data for then to go to clinical support on their side.
Absolutely love it, man. Absolutely love it. Yeah. So there's a component within the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services where they use aspects of this, but it's really more inverse, where they're looking at it from like a fraud, waste, and abuse component. Yeah. And that's why I was curious about that. But yeah, totally loving it. I love the technology aspect of it.
Go ahead. So our objective is to be where you have a lot of it on the provider-payer side, because a lot of communication systems actually derived out of financial systems and billing systems. I took it on the patient side, and that generates that way. So it completes the circle. So it's complementary to a lot of those existing systems, but you're feeding a whole different context that LifeWIRE is able to do. And the other side of it is just to sort of put what I thought was kind of fun was, as the biggest complaint, or that is not criticism, but the barrier, everyone said, well, you're good as long as people respond, communicating in a communication system. And that stopped me for a while. Then as I got more and more involved in this, I realized, and particularly because of a stubborn cuss that I am, that a non-response or not responding is actually a choice. I choose not to respond to something, whether it's a text, an email, or whatever, or to people talking to me. So in fact, a non-response is a response. So we built our technology to tie that into it, so we can actually measure time to response. And so if they don't respond in a certain period of time, triggers outreach, or the number of questions you don't respond to, that triggers outreach. So we actually have 100% accountability of every interaction that goes. Whether someone has responded or not responded and what they responded to, and have protocols associated with it all. Yeah.
That's
very impressive, man. Yeah, I would love to talk offline a little bit about that, especially on the VA side.
Sure.
Yeah, with some of the PTSD patients, I can only imagine, because there was a security parameter that was put in place over at the VA to where when people come in, they want to start having it to where they can look at a person's face, be able to kind of detect who they are, kind of what their history is, and then also determine are they a risk, right? Because the VA has had situations at various bases, if you will, without using like an actual Vincent name. What was happening was some people were going to the clinic and then they would unfortunately commit suicide, or something would happen in the car out in the parking lot because no one knew how bad the case was. So I'm loving what you're doing. Hats off to you, man. It's super impressive.
I appreciate that. Yeah, in fact, because you're talking about the VA, one of the populations we worked with in terms was in women's health. And just to give you a sense of, and just in terms of the types of clients that we've had, and his women's health program is actually part of their maternal care program. So this was combat-trained female vets suffering from post-traumatic stress who are pregnant. And that population, there was a 78% probability of a suicidal event, not necessarily to success, but an event nevertheless.
Wow, man.
And we worked with that group, and it's been our honor that while we worked on that program, that there was not one reported successful suicide for those that were, obviously using our program along with the VA's other programs, but those collectively, for that period of time, there wasn't one reported successful suicide.
That's amazing.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah, gosh, Howard, I could talk to you for a very long time about this. This definitely is very important to me. And my father actually passed away last year in June. Unfortunately, it wasn't based on PTSD events, but he had severe PTSD. And so that was something that, was near and dear to me, man. So hats off to you.
Sorry to hear about that. But yeah, it's sadly it's not an uncommon problem.
Yeah.
And to finish it, sorry, apologies, just to sort of finish this off to your question, Kaya, the other piece of this is the advice is obviously always being aware what your clients want. And the other side to this is, and I think you touched on it, Oscar, for a moment, was about privacy and security. Though you talked about security visa going to the VA. The other thing in terms of communication, what we do is how do you deal with security and privacy, particularly when you're dealing with, in theory, an open solution like we have where people can choose whatever means of communication that they want.
Yeah. And
to sort of just to show that we actually have found the way to do that, we've recently been certified, or high trust certified.
Nice.
That is very, very, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. Folks that are in the security world or in the gov world, they know what that takes.
Yeah. That's another one that's a bit of a mug's game in terms of had we known what was involved, we would have done it, but we might have braced ourselves better for going through that initial audit. Only 18 months and a few more gray hairs.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about entrepreneurship. Sometimes you don't know until you know.
There it is.
And sometimes it's better you don't know, because otherwise you may not do it.
I agree.
Very good point. Howard, let me read something to our guests that you wrote over to us when we were talking and tossing around some ideas about the show.
Sure.
Inspiration can come from anywhere. The trick is not only to see it, as the difficulty is maintaining that vision and trying to realize it. What does that mean to you, Howard?
What that means is, as an entrepreneur, I'm sure you guys have been through this. You're inspired, however you're inspired by an idea, and usually it comes from crazy places.
Yeah.
And it's a unique vision that you have as that entrepreneur for this idea. But there's a lot of people, frankly, who have ideas, but you break down that group much smaller to those who actually say, I'm going to do this. Is a much smaller group than those who have sort of get these ideas. And as you're doing it, the forces around you to tell you shouldn't do it, or you can't do it, or we're not going to support you in doing it, again, I'm sure you guys have run into this, is amazingly large. And it's those that are somehow can maintain that vision throughout that. That's the real trick on all this. Now, you may not be successful the first time, but to be able to create that muscle, to be able to just understand that vision and push through when you've got all these forces around you is really, to me, that's the true sense of the entrepreneurship and the hardest, part of the mountain to climb.
That's powerful.
Yeah, I couldn't close it out any better than that.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah, Howard, thank you so much for being a guest on our show. It means a lot to both Kai and I for you taking time out on your busy schedule to be a part of this. I am sure that our listenership is going to gain a ton of good information based upon what you shared. Howard, if people want to get in contact, they want to learn more about LifeWIRE, how can they do that?
Well, the website is www.lifewiregroup.com. And certainly reach out to me directly on my email, which is hrosen@lifewiregroup.com, or Twitter at LifeWire Connect.
Excellent. We'll be sure.
But thank you so much for inviting me. This was a tremendously enjoyable experience.
Excellent, and we'll be sure that we add all of your contact information in the show notes and everything, so everyone will be able to get easy access to that. Howard, again, thank you so much, man. We'll be talking soon.
Oscar, Kaya, thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Take care.
You've been listening to the Couple-preneurs Show. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.kothoughtleaders.com.